I hope you are well wherever you are listening to this speech. My name is Catherine. I'm going to talk to you today a little about the interpreter's response to COVID-19 and whether RSI, that's remote simultaneous interpretation, is a long-term solution. Now, COVID-19 is a global pandemic that has shaken the world over the past few months, and which I'm sure you're all very aware of, and perhaps some of you are pretty fed up of hearing about it by now. But I think it's important to discuss the knock-on effects that the current situation will have on our profession. I myself have been very impressed and encouraged by the work and the effort that has been put into organising many of the tools for conference interpreters to get their work online over the last few weeks and even months. Within the first few weeks of the pandemic, as lockdowns started to take place across Europe, in Italy, Spain, the UK, and of course many other countries as well, I was struck by how many people in our profession decided to respond and not just react. Now, while reacting would suggest a knee-jerk response fueled by fear and a doom and gloom mentality, responding can be a lot more thoughtful. Now, while I acknowledge that there are rational fears with this pandemic, and for many of us, we will have had up and down days in the middle of this whole situation, I think I've seen a lot of good come out of, and a lot of goodwill come out of this situation from our colleagues who have been thoughtfully responding to help not just themselves, but other people in our profession. Now, the first thing that I noticed was the prevalence of companies offering free webinars and Zoom meetings to interpreters who wished to learn about remote simultaneous interpreting and who wanted to qualify using these online platforms. They included companies like Kudo and Interprenet, and of course, associations like IEC also stepped up to offer helpful advice with blogs and information which was published across LinkedIn. I took advantage of many of these online learning webinars and felt much more confident to be able to offer my services online throughout this time. Now, before some of my more experienced interpreter colleagues come at me with their criticisms, even though there are some valid ones, which I will go into later, I'd like to point out some of the benefits of remote simultaneous interpreting. So just bear with me for a little while and let's keep an open mind, because I think this could really be helpful for the profession. So, firstly, RSI can be beneficial to interpreters because it makes our job more efficient. Just imagine you have your typical meeting, say it's in Munich, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. You wake up early in London, you have to fight your way across traffic on public transport to get to the airport, where you have to wade through security, where you eventually get to your gate, where there's a 45-minute delay, where you then spend a fortune on coffee and snacks to keep you going, because by that point you had breakfast 4 hours ago. Then you eventually get to your destination, have to fight your way through public transport the other end up in a conference centre, and because it's just a one-day meeting, you have to do the entire journey all the way home again, and then you eventually crash into bed after midnight, waking up tired the next day and all out of sync. If, instead of doing this, we used remote simultaneous interpretation platforms, it would be possible to wake up in your own home, have a couple of hours preparing, consolidating your glossaries, doing a little bit of last-minute research, checking over your information, and then sitting down at your desk after lunch to commence your meeting. After which you have time to calm down, relax a little while, have dinner with your family, and then go to bed at a decent time. Remote simultaneous interpreting could be a long-term solution because it reduces our travel time and it makes our work more efficient. Reducing our travel time enables us to have more time to put energy into many other things. But I'm getting ahead of myself. What I want to mention mostly about this is that not only does it save us travel time, but it also helps the environment. We've heard a lot over the last couple of years about school climate strikes and how governments really need to take climate change seriously, and we can do our bit too. As interpreters, we don't always have to go physically to a conference to be able to offer a good service. With interpreting platforms getting better and better as the years go by, we could do our job from home, and we can do a pretty good job of it too. So you could feel good for helping the environment, getting your job done, and also having extra time, which leads me to my next point. What can we do with all of this extra time? Well, it's still perfectly possible to engage in networking and collaboration with other interpreting colleagues from home. You can use tools like LinkedIn and have Zoom meetings. You can reach out to people online and ask for advice. We can also, for example, reach more communities whose languages aren't as common. For example, I know of one colleague working in rural Mexico who is using online interpreting platforms to be able to reach more remote people groups who otherwise wouldn't necessarily have interpreters go there physically. That's something that we could also do. As interpreters, of course, we love languages. We could also spend time learning more languages and taking another step up the career ladder. Another thing which we've noticed over the past few months and several weeks is how doing work at home would enable us to have a better work-life balance. We have more time to, as I mentioned, eat with our families or take a walk at lunchtime, do all of those things which we wouldn't normally be able to do. And I think this would be better overall for our health, our physical and our mental health. So it's well worth considering how RSI saves us time and gives us more opportunities to work as interpreters and more opportunities for collaboration. Now, the glaring elephant in the room, and I think by far the biggest criticism that I've heard of remote simultaneous interpreting, is about standards. Now, let's talk about standards. There are some really valid concerns which we do need to take into consideration. Many of our colleagues have worked long and hard to fight for the conditions that we now get to enjoy as interpreters within the conference interpreting world. Long gone are the days when interpreters were asked to just hold a coat over their heads to be able to interpret. Now, that's a real thing. You can look it up. It's very amusing. But I think we can all appreciate the fact that we have proper booths now. We have rights to good sound quality. We usually have a moderator who's able to liaise between us and the conference organizer to get the right things that we need, to get water, to get proper pay and proper breaks as well. And the concern is, if we do remote simultaneous interpreting, there's nobody really going to be in charge of making sure that those breaks exist, that quality exists, and of course it could also affect our ability to speak with colleagues. We no longer have that booth kind of communication. You're very much thrown in at the deep end and on your own, and that's definitely something to consider. And of course, it increases a sedentary lifestyle. So even though we have perhaps more time with our family and our friends, and we don't have to do the commute, we are sitting behind a desk or a screen potentially for hours at a time. And many of us didn't get into the profession to do that. Many of us got into the profession because we wanted to travel, to have that cultural exchange, that language exchange, the opportunity to meet new people, and that's definitely something to consider. Something else to consider is the responsibility of making sure that we have good technology. So if we are making sure that our bedrooms or our kitchens or our offices are now our de facto booths, we need to consider sound quality. We need to consider soundproofing. There's nobody there to ensure that the neighbour's dog doesn't just start barking, for example, in the background, or your toddler comes walking in. That's very possible. And perhaps people's concerns might be that would reduce the overall quality of the profession. I mean, if any old Jim or Harry can get online and say that they're an interpreter, where's the standard gone? And I think it's important to take all of this into consideration. But I think that we're also at the very start of this change into remote simultaneous interpreting, where, as I mentioned, when interpreters started out, things were very rudimentary. There weren't the standards, but these things took time, and as people worked collectively, which we've seen people can do, especially over the last few weeks and months, things improved. So when all interpreters got together and said, okay, we want to fight for X pay, we want to fight for X quality of sound and X type of booth, things started to change. And I can only hope that would also happen with remote simultaneous interpreting. So of course, you're always going to get people that are going to undercut. You're always going to get people who aren't offering the same standard as the rest. But I think the majority tend to work together to improve things. So I think since our profession came out of people doing the best with what they've got, that's exactly what's going to happen with remote simultaneous interpreting as well. At the moment, okay, we don't have a worldwide standard for this is the amount of soundproofing you need to have in your room and the technology you have in your room. But over time, that will improve, and as we work together, as we collaborate as interpreters across a profession, I think that we will be able to obtain those standards. I think for now, it's giving it a chance. We need to say yes to the technology, adapt and change. Otherwise, we may well find that things change without us, and we can move forward together. So, in answer to the question, is RSI a long-term solution? I'd say absolutely yes. I, for one, am pro RSI, and I'd love to have further discussions with you all about it at some point in the future. Thank you very much.